Experience, Strength, and Hope for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until he has finished, and he's been a great inspiration in my sobriety. So it's my pleasure to introduce John, another John.
All right, I'm going to put this coffee down. If I drink this coffee, I'll speak till 10:30. It's I think that, yeah, it's a controlled substance, I think. Anyway, John always tells me that a line that I used, I think the last time I spoke here, is I love coming up here. One, I love to be the center of attention. We'll get the truth out of the way, but I also get to stand here and talk about my two favorite things, me and Alcoholics Anonymous. And I love Alcoholics Anonymous because it saved my life. I am, I guess, a little bit different. I was actually born in Prescott. Born here, grew up here, had my first drink here in Prescott, probably about 1967 or something, here in Prescott. And the amazing thing is how this program works is one of the guys that I started drinking with 50 some years ago, I'm sponsoring him now. It's a guy that was my best friend in middle school. Now he's back, we're both sober, and I get to work with that guy. It's like, how did that happen? But like I said, I grew up here in Prescott, had my first drink here. I think I had, truly honestly, I probably had an hour and a half of social drinking in my life. I was a blackout drinker when I was 13 years old. I have no question in my mind now that I had alcoholism when I was in 8th grade. And I didn't know it for a long time after that. But when I started drinking, I drank until something happened. And that was either me passing out, throwing up, falling down, or all of the above in no particular order. I would, so when I started drinking at a very young age, I could not control how much I was going to drink once I started, and that never changed. That part in the Big Book where they describe that physical allergy to alcohol, I had that. I did not drink myself into alcoholism. I had it from the very first time I started drinking, and so. Fortunately for me, I'll tell you one story. And when I was about 14 years old, my mom and a bunch of high school, my mom and one of her friends took a whole bunch of us down to Guaymas, Mexico for Easter vacation. And I was probably 14, and my friend was 14, mostly as my friend's older brothers and all their friends. So it was a bunch of high school kids and a couple of us punky little 14-year-old guys. And I went to the cantina with these older guys and bugged them till they bought me some beer. And I drank beer. And then most of what follows is rumor, because I don't remember exactly what happened. But I do remember going down to the beach after they told me I couldn't hang around the canteen anymore. And there was a bunch of college students down there drinking and partying on the beach. And I started going through their ice chest looking for more beer. They didn't like that. And so they kind of chased me away, and I ran into one of their younger brothers who was also tagging along on this trip, and he's holding his brother's bottle of tequila, and he wouldn't give it to me, so I decked him and I stole it. So now, the truth is, at that age, probably at any age, I was this little, skinny nerd guy with crooked glasses, and I was much better at doing algebra than I was playing sports. I was a nerd. It's hard to believe a cool looking guy like me now, but I was a real nerd in school. And that's being the kind of the smart nerdy guy is a strategy of life that works till you're about 10. And then it really starts losing its shine because girls weren't that impressed with nerdy guys who couldn't play sports. And but anyway, so I went from the little quiet, nerdy, shy kid to robbery in the space of about 4 hours. And I ran off with this kid's bottle and hit it, and all kinds of shit happened, and nothing. I'm stealing shit from people in Mexico. That's always a good start. But the good news is I found other ways to get a drink other than stealing it from people, or I wouldn't be standing here today. I knew enough people in this town. If you had some money, they'd go to the liquor store and buy you a case of beer, and we would steal it from our parents, and we'd steal it from our older friends, and I was a big beer mooch. I was actually what it was. I was a kind of a mooch. My favorite drink was always yours, and it was it. If you had something, I wanted it, and just to skip ahead, for a while there, I had an office, a party for the people in my office, a 4th of July party at my house. This just about 15 years ago, and they would come over, and they're all normies. I worked in an office full of normies mostly, and they would come to my house, and they would bring beer for this barbecue that I was putting on. I didn't mind me. I didn't mind it. They would bring it over, and they would bring beer, but this is how weird these people are. They would bring a 6-pack of beer, drink 2 of them, and leave the rest. So by the time this party's over, I had more beer than when we started. I do not understand that. I do not understand it. When I went to a party, I bought beer and left it in my car. Drank yours, and if you ran out, I went and got one out of my car. So that's the kind of drinker I was, and sharing was not caring. And so anyway, I grew up here, like I said, and I was kind of a weekend drunk at that time. Like I said, when I drank, I got drunk. Couldn't really control or know what was going to happen, but I was able to kind of keep it to the weekends, and kind of have that image of at least somebody looked like they had their shit together during the week, and then would get drunk over the weekend, and that worked well enough for me to go to college. So I went off to college and learned that you could still be a weekend drunk in college and drink about 5 days a week, because Thursday is almost a weekend. Friday's a weekend, Saturday's a weekend, and Sunday's a weekend. So, 4 to 5 days a week drinking is still weekend partying. I couldn't keep it to that, but it sounded good, And I fell in with a bunch of guys, and we would drink and call ourselves Alcoholics Unanimous, and just a bunch of smart-ass guys, and we just drank and made fun of anybody who wasn't a drunk like us, and that's what my life was like. I was didn't get a lot done in college. I got through college, but all the things you can do in college, concerts, cultural stuff, I didn't do any of that. It was drinking and trying to eke my way through, and I got through college, and these guys I drank with were pretty much all, I'd say half of them were alcoholics. The other half were heavy drinkers, and when they got out of college, they said, boy, that was fun, and they just quit drinking like that. And they have 2 beers on the weekend when they mow the yard, and they're fine. The other half, my half, just kept going, and they're all dead but me. Every one of my college drinking buddies is dead. And a lot of them died a lot younger than I think they should have died, given my age now. But they, so I was with these smart-ass guys, as my friend Mark always says, we were educated beyond our intelligence, and we, so we thought we were really smart and clever and sarcastic. And if you're a smart, sarcastic, egotistical alcoholic, really there's only a few options for you. So I went to law school and became a drunk, sarcastic lawyer. Actually, somehow I was able to con my way through law school, and actually got to be, and somehow became a lawyer. And it wasn't easy. I had a lot of missteps along the way, and came close to flunking out on a couple occasions, but just was able to kind of squeak my way through, and they made me a lawyer, and so I moved back to Prescott, and I had this theory. I was going to be one of those I always had these visions in my head. I was going to be one of those, hard working, hard partying, kick ass kind of guys. I had the hard partying, the hard working, kick ass, not so much. I came up here and I opened an office and I was trying to work, and the first day I had my office open, I was so hungover I couldn't go to work, and that was a theme. And so I was just trying to get my shit together. I didn't want to be a drunk anymore. I wanted to somehow figure out a way that I could party and drink and have fun and not have shitty things happen, which is my definition of controlled drinking, and is drink a lot without shitty things happening. And I could not pull that off, And so I called a friend of mine and said, I'm having a little trouble with my drinking. The only person I know who'd ever been to treatment, one of my college friends, he went to treatment down in Phoenix to St. Luke's. And so I called him and said, I'm having a little trouble with my drinking. And so he got me a big book and a meeting list. And I was telling a guy today, at that time I was 27 years old. And he gave me this meeting list, and I was going to go to a meeting at the old Alano Club down on McCormick, where the Wild Iris is now. It was the Alano Club at that time. And it said Alano Club over the door. I didn't know what Alano Club was, but that's what it said. And I walked by, then I turned around and walked by, and I walked by like 5 times because I could not get the nerve to walk in because I was so scared to go in there. Now, mind you, for years I've been walking out of the bars on Whiskey Road drunk ass and not caring if anybody saw me, but I didn't want to be seen going into an Alano Club, So I walk in there and scared to death. And it was a young people's candlelight meeting. I was so creeped out I almost ran. It was like, what the hell is this, But I stayed, and I hung around, and I went to meetings for about a month. And I went to, I don't know, half a dozen meetings maybe over that month time, maybe 8. And then I was drinking again. And I don't know to this day how I went from going to those meetings for a month to drinking again. I have no memory of how I went from a month of sobriety to drinking again, but I started drinking again. But the problem was you guys had already put the curse on me. I got the first thing we always have to do when you come into the program, first thing we do is we screw up your drinking. And they screwed up my drinking because I came in and they gave me a book, and I read the book, and I went to the meetings, and I knew I was an alcoholic. So the mystery was gone. I knew I was a drunk. I knew I was an alcoholic. That didn't get me sober, but it just really made my drinking suck. And, so for the next year and a half, I knew I was an alcoholic. And I'd get up in the morning, and I'd be so hungover I couldn't breathe. And I'd have to go to work because I was always broke. And because I had a bar tab that way exceeded my income ability. And so I'd have to get up and go to work, and I would go to work, and I'd be like sweating beer out of every pore, and I just wanted to lay down on something cold, and it's just like I feel like shit. Oh, and I'd sit in my office and read the big book. Fun. That's a fun life. Hungover like hell, reading the big book. So I'd be sitting there reading the big book, and I would swear I was not drinking. I'm not drinking tonight. I'm not drinking forever, or at least I'm not drinking today. I'm not drinking this week. Whatever the story was of the day, I'm not drinking. And then tomorrow I'll feel better, and I can actually get some work done and, get my shit together, or maybe eat something. And so that would be my day. I'm not drinking today, and I'd sit there and go, tomorrow will be better. And then about 4:30, 5 o'clock, I would forget that I quit drinking. I would absolutely forget that I quit drinking, and I would walk out of my office, and I would walk by the Hacienda bar. Now, it's not the nice, new, retro Art Deco Hacienda that's there now. It was a little seedy dive. It was just like really old and dirty then. And I walked by and it had a vacuum on the front of it, and it would suck me right in that door. And I would sit down, and I'd have, this is my lie of the day. I would say, okay, it also kind of dates me, but I would write a check. That, if you don't know what a check is, ask around. But I would write a check for like $10 because I thought, $10, I get 2 beers and have money for lunch tomorrow. all right, I have to write another check, and so I would write 2 or 3 checks a night, but always for $10 because 20 seemed like a lot at the time, and because I was broke and probably didn't have money in my account anyway. So then I would, there it was, and it's closing time, and I'm going home drunk, driving 5 miles out Center Highway drunk again. And next day I'd get up and I'd be so hungover I couldn't breathe, and Groundhog Day. And I would go to work and I'd swear I wasn't drinking, and I would read the big book and I would swear I wasn't drinking, and I'd be drinking before the sun went down. And I did that all over and over and over. And then at the end of the month, in those days they would send you your old checks at the end of the month. That was a treat, getting about 50 checks to the Hacienda bar for $10 that you couldn't read. And but I just did that over and over and over again. Of today I'm not going to drink. Today I quit. And I couldn't stay quit all day most of the time. I can honestly say in that year and a half between going to those meetings in July of 1984, I can honestly say I quit drinking 300 times. I'm sure I did. I couldn't stay quit all day, but I would quit, and it was 2 or 3, 4 or 5 days a week I would quit, and I just couldn't do it. And then I had this person I was working with, and I was going to convince her. She thought this is a line that I've heard more than once. I don't know if you ever heard this line, but I love you, but you drink too much, get out. So I heard that again. The bad news was she said, I love you, you drink too much, I'm leaving, I'm going back to my husband. Ooh, there's an amends I wish I could have made, but anyway, so I was gonna convince her. I was gonna get her back. I was gonna convince her I was not an alcoholic. So I went on the just pucker it up and stay dry theory of staying sober, and so I didn't drink mostly for about 4 months, and it was the most miserable 4 months of my life. Anybody who's gone just completely dry for 4 months without a program, people said I liked you better when you were drinking. I was angry. I felt like a clenched fist all day long, and I would still hang around the bars, good thinking. I'd go to the bars and I'd drink grapefruit juice or Diet Cola or some damn thing, and hang around in the bars, not drinking. And that was horrible. And didn't impress her either, She didn't think that was all that great. And so I just was hanging around the bars not drinking because I was so sick of being a drunk. Of trying. I tried for 15 years to figure out a way to drink without catastrophic results, and I couldn't do it. And, I had a car that looked like it had been driven off a cliff. I was living in a house with no heat and not being able to pay the rent on that. And, it was a mess. And the only thing that kept me from being homeless was I hadn't run out of people to mooch from yet. And, I had a guy who was letting me stay in this house without no heat for free at Groom Creek, and that's the only thing that kept me going. And so I was trying to impress this girl, and that didn't work, and it was miserable, and it was just so excruciating of dry drunk, restless, irritable, and discontent is what the book calls it, and I was that every minute of the day, and I had no choice. I had to drink, and I found myself mistakenly drunk 2 days in a row. I had no intention of getting drunk, and I was drunk a couple of times, and much to my surprise, and so I called this guy who'd been bugging me. There's another guy in town. He's about two years sober, and he saw me going through all this, somehow deduced that I might have a problem. Even though I had it quite well concealed, I thought. But he saw me going through this, the drunk and then the really angry dry drunk. And he kept saying stuff like, oh, come on down. We got a chair for you. There's an easier way to do this. Come on down. Come on down to the Alana. I'll take you to a meeting, And my response is, I don't know if you ever had this response, is, I'm just fine. God damn it. And that's what it was. I mean, I'm just like, no, I got this. You know? And then when I found myself surprisingly drunk those times, I was driving around town here, Prescott. I was driving around town, drinking beer. 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I've been drinking for about 8 hours, and driving around drinking in my car, and I couldn't quit drinking, and I couldn't get drunk enough to make the noise stop. You know, it was just like I couldn't quit. I just had to keep drinking, but the voice that kept saying, "What a loser piece of crap you are," I couldn't make that voice shut up. And so I called this guy, and I said, actually, I called his answering machine, left a message, and said, I need help. And I don't think I drank after that until he came Monday and picked me up and scooped me up and took me to a meeting. And that guy, one of the many people who saved my life. You know, he scooped me up and took me to a meeting, and I started going to meetings here. Took me to the Prescott group, which became my home group, which is my home group today. You know, that's a meeting I've been going to for, well, longer than I've been continuously sober, actually, you know, because I went to that meeting for a year, and I got a service commitment, and I made coffee, and I set up chairs, and I was the secretary of that meeting, and I did some service commitments, and I got sponsors that I never talked to. I was a stealth sponsee. I would ask somebody to be my sponsor, and then I would never talk to them again. Because I was afraid they'd ask me to do something, you know. So I wasn't willing to go that next step, you know. I did the service work. I went to probably 400 meetings that year. But I didn't get honest with a sponsor, do the steps. I didn't complete an inventory. I didn't make any amends. I didn't do any of those things that they say to do in the book. In the book, where it kind of says, do these things or you'll die, is kind of what it says in the book. But I didn't do those things. And so I had went to my home group, and I picked up a chip, my first year chip. They gave me a card and a chip and a cake, and I told them what a great job I was doing, and, you know, hey, look at me. And 2 weeks later, I was drunk. I was with some guys that I probably didn't have no business hanging around with, and I went, and they said, about 10 o'clock in the morning, they said, you want a beer? And I said, no. Okay. That was it. You know, I was like Fred the accountant in the big book, you know. It's like, oh, no, everything's good, everything's great. I'll have a beer. And so I was 54 weeks sober. I had picked up that drink. I did not ease back into it. I had that beer about 10 o'clock in the morning. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was in a blackout. 6 hours later, somebody drove me home and dumped me in my front yard, and I crawled up the steps into my house and passed out. Now, getting drunk with a 1-year chip in your pocket is a humbling experience for an egomaniac like me. You know, so I got, you know, so the next day I got up and I was so full of fear and remorse and guilt and what will they think? The most important thing in the world, what will they think? And this guy came by. I didn't even know all that well. It was a good buddy of mine. I think he just happened to drop by my house. Pretty obvious I'd been drinking. And that man stayed with me all day long. And he just, whatever he was doing that day, he just quit. And he just spent the day with me all day. And then when it was time to go to a meeting, he took me to a meeting that night, and I raised my hand as a newcomer. That man saved my life, because I don't know, with the ego that I have, whether I would have been able to bring myself back and admit that I drank again. So anybody who comes back, and you know, I admire you, because I know what it's like to, if you got an ego like mine, if, you know, I don't want to go back because they might think I'm an alcoholic or something. I don't know what I'm afraid they'll think, you know, but, you know, that I don't have my shit together or something, you know, but, and I got to remember, oh yeah, there's a whole club for a building full of people who don't have their shit together, you know, that's what we're here for. And, but anyway, I came back, and that guy took me to a meeting, and that was August 3rd, 1985, and I haven't had to have a drink since then, you know, and that guy saved my life like that other guy did, and I've had people save my life on a regular basis over the last 36 years. And then I haven't had to leave the program. I came close once. I came close to easing myself out of the program. I had gotten married. My wife had gotten sober after we got married. That's a whole different program that we'll talk about at a different meeting. Anyway, I married my wife. Turned out she was an alcoholic. She got sober. And then when I was about 8 years sober, I started getting busy. I don't know if anybody here has got busy when they're about, get some time. I had a job, family, good stuff on TV. I don't know what it was, but I was too busy to go to AA anymore. And started easing my way out. My sponsor that I had at that time had remarried and quit going to meetings himself, and so I didn't have a sponsor. And I didn't have any service commitments. I wasn't sponsoring anybody else. I was on the way out. And that's about the time a lot of people drink, 7 or 8 years. Again, I worked their way out of the program, and I was so close. And I think God just hit me in the head with something big and got my attention because I realized, I remember it like it was today. I remember thinking, I know I'm an alcoholic. I had no doubt in my mind. I've seen me trying to drink. I know I'm an alcoholic. I was 40 years old at the time. I thought, I'm either going to keep me sober for the rest of my life, by myself, or I'm going to go back to AA. And me keeping me sober without AA was a terrifying proposition because I know what that looks like. I know what me trying to keep me sober looks like. It looks like, excruciating pain until I have to drink again. That's what that looks like for me. And so I started going back to meetings. I got a sponsor, Dave Smith. I asked him to be my sponsor, and it was scary because I had to call him and tell him I didn't have a sponsor. I hadn't done any work. I wasn't going to meetings. And so I had to actually get honest with him, and I hate doing that, and tell him what was going on. And so I said, okay, good. Come over to my house. We're doing some step work here. So I started doing the steps with Dave. At that time, Dave had been sober for about 30 years. He sponsored 1 million people here and in Phoenix. He was 60 years old at the time, and he was in love with Alcoholics Anonymous, with the steps, and he's, like I said, he sponsored a bunch of guys, and he sponsored me until he died of cancer. He was 71 years old when he died of cancer, and he was a guy, we were doing a big book study at his house 4 days before he died. We used to do it at another guy's house. He got too sick to come. We started going to his house. We were doing the big book study while he was in a hospital bed 4 days before he passed. And that was Dave. I mean, it was his dedication to the program was it. And then after he passed, I eventually asked Larry to be my sponsor, a man named Larry Wills. He was my sponsor. And he just passed away a couple months ago. He had early onset dementia, and he passed away. But those two guys, inspired me because Larry was dedicated to service, just like Dave was. The joke was if you saw Larry coming with a clipboard run, because he was signing you up for something, he always had some kind of service commitment going on, some kind of service thing. Larry was dedicated to service, and he sponsored a bunch of guys, and that's the way he was until he got too sick. And so those guys, I say I've been blessed and cursed with good sponsorship because those guys showed me, not just told me, but they showed me what it's like to be a sober man in AA and be dedicated to the program. And when Larry went into assisted living and because his dementia got so bad, and my brain, which is never my friend, said I was afraid I would start hearing you've been sober a long time. There's no rush to get a new sponsor. I mean, you've been sober a long time. You sponsor guys. Do you really need a new sponsor? And I figured out, yes, I do. And so by the grace of God, I got a new sponsor, and been working with him. And he's another guy that sponsors a bunch of guys, is dedicated to service, and so I'm surrounded by people who are dedicated to the program. Like I said, my wife got sober. We had been married about 3 or 4 years when she got sober, and she spoke here about a month ago, I think it was. She spoke here, And she wasn't in love with the program at first, but when she started getting involved with Big Book Studies with her sponsor, she caught on fire with the program. And I don't know, she sponsors, I don't know, 1,000 people. I don't know. She sponsors a bunch of people, and they sponsor people, and that's kind of how it works, you know. And I always tell people, I said, it says in the Big Book, it says, there is a solution. And what it says is, many people don't like it. What it really should say is, there's a solution, you'll hate it, you know. Because the solution is hard folding chairs in a dirty room on Saturday evening, you know. It's it's getting up and going to do some service work when you'd rather sit on your butt. That's my experience, you know. It's answering the phone when sponsees call, saying yes when somebody asks you to be their sponsor. When somebody says, we need somebody to do service work, you say yes. I don't want to do any of that stuff because I'm lazy and I'm selfish and I have a lot of stuff in my head that I think is real important. But I've been shown the truth is that all that stuff that I think is so important in my head, I don't get anything out of that I get from here. I mean, this has given me everything. Like I said, for the guy who's had the long history of "I love you, but get out" story, my wife and I, just about a month ago, celebrated, been married for 33 years. You know, in my sobriety, I have lost everybody that I'm related to in my family. My mom died 2 years ago, and that's the last relative that I know of in my family. But Diana comes from this gigantic family, this big, giant Hispanic family. And I am now Uncle John to about 40 of these kids and their kids and their kids, you know. And so I got this family that I had no idea I was going to be a part of. And none of them have seen me drunk. Most of them know I'm in the program. Some of them ask questions about being in the program. I have 2 grandkids. I had no idea I was ever going to be a grandpa. You know, I have a stepson who has had his own struggles. I have 2 grandkids. They've never seen me drink. They've never seen their nana drink. You know, they are growing up in a family where nobody's insanely drunk, which is a first in my family for sure. You know, alcoholism has been screwing up my family, as far as I can tell, since at least the 1920s. So it's been 100 years alcohol has been screwing up my family. My mom's dad was an alcoholic, and he died from drinking. My dad died from drinking when he was 56 years old. His liver gave out on him from drinking. You know, all the alcoholics but me and my family are dead. You know, and I'm alive today because of this program. You know, I can honestly say if I was 31 years old when I took my last drink, and I wasn't always this old dude. I was 31 years old when I had my last drink, and smart money wouldn't have bet on me living to be 35. I would have either drank myself to death, crashed my car into a ravine, either accidentally or on purpose, or put a bullet in my head, because I could not have stood being me for very much longer. I was just at the point where I just could not stand living the way I was living. And I was looking over the edge, and I didn't see a bottom. It was just like, yeah, there's just no, I was on a downhill slope, and I didn't see a bottom. I was just saved by the grace of God that I got to be here. And, so like I said, for me, and this just shows how my crazy brain works, because I need to be reminded of this. I mean, my life is wonderful because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can forget that in 3 hours. You know, I used to work in Camp Verde, so I would drive from Prescott over to Camp Verde. I'd leave about 7 o'clock in the morning, go to Camp Verde, get off at 5, and drive back. So I'd be gone from 7 to 6, and so we were doing a Big Book workshop at my house. A bunch of guys from one of these treatment places were coming over to my house for a Big Book workshop on Wednesday evening at 6:30. and I'd leave the office at 6, and I'd be driving home, and I'd be thinking, why do I have to do this? Why are these guys coming to my house? Why do I have to I'm tired. I've worked a long day. I want to just relax. And and I'd be whining to myself all the way home. I'd pull into my driveway. They'd already be there. They'd be sitting in my carport waiting for me to get home, And we'd go down to the basement of my house, and we would read out of the big book, and these young guys were on fire, and they were excited about being sober. And by the time they left, I felt like I'd had a triple espresso, like I'd had a cup of that coffee, And it's like, man, I'm so grateful you guys came. I feel so excited and grateful that you guys are here. A week later, I'm driving home going, why are these guys coming over to my house? Because I can't remember for a week the good shit that I get from this program, because that's my brain. My brain defaults to self-pity and resentment and selfishness. That's my default setting. So if I don't keep rebooting with you guys, that's where I go. That's why I don't think I would be very good at keeping me sober, This program has given me everything. Like I said, I was a lawyer. I couldn't work fast enough to keep up with my bar bill. Probably that being really hungover, really bad all the time was probably a big part of that, And then I got sober, and I retired in January. I've been a lawyer for almost 40 years, and think I did a reasonably good job of it, And I was a guy who thought I probably couldn't have made that either, And so I've got a family, I got a wife, I got a home that has alcoholics coming in and out of it all day long. I know people in this program that I've known for 30 years because I've been sober in this town this whole time. And so I got a wife who's sober. I got a whole big family that I didn't have anything to do with. I just got put in, I think, it's just that the miracles that I got out of this program is just astounding. And I got two things I'm going to share, and then I'm going to quit. One, and again, this is just kind of how things worked for me in this program. I was living in that house in Groom Creek with no heat. And then that guy 12-stepped me, and I decided, okay, I'm going to give this sobriety a try. I was about a week sober. My landlord said, you have to move because I sold the house. These other people are moving into it. You got to find another place to live. So I set my eyes on this really cute girl. I was going to move in with her. That did not work. Apparently, that was not the plan. So instead, this lady I know who's a realtor, who I used to drink with, who did not know I was trying to get sober, took me over to this other lady's house and said, she's got a guest house over her garage, about a 200 square foot guest house over her garage, and she'll rent it. It's cheap. So I went over, said, great, I love this. Okay, I'll take it. Like I said, I'm a week sober. And then as we're leaving, I signed the lease, we're leaving, and my friend Johanna, who's a realtor, said, oh, I hope this won't be a problem, but Luann is a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so are all her kids and all of her friends. So her house is full of sober people all the time. And I found out the reason I had to move was the house I was living in was bought by the Dohertys, who were both sober in AA, and they wanted to move up to Groom Creek and reopen the store that had been in that building. So two sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous buy this store. I have to move, and I get put into Luann's guest house, when I'm 2 weeks sober. And it's felt like God just said, no, I need you over here, And I had nothing to do with that. And it's like, maybe I didn't need to be by myself out in the woods. Maybe I needed to be in Luann's garage, And the other twist on that is 3 years later, Luann was my wife's sponsor. So it's like, hey, how that works. But, and so, it's just like, okay, somebody just picked me up, put me where I needed to be. And maybe somebody picked you up and put you here against your better ideas too, And that's how I ended up here. My ideas didn't necessarily work very well. The other thing I want to say, and here's a gift of the program, is this morning, like I said, I had to get a new sponsor because Larry had passed away, and so I was meeting with my new sponsor. And he said, you know what would be fun is to get all my sponsees together and have a little barbecue. So my new sponsor, Hugh, and he called his sponsees, I called my sponsees, they called their sponsees, and we had for lack of a better word, a lineage picnic today. So Hugh and all his sponsees and their sponsees and their sponsees, we had a picnic at a Goldwater Lake. There's 42 men at this picnic this afternoon sharing experience, strength, and hope. And we had everything from Hugh, who has 48 years of sobriety, to a guy who think I'd been sober for a week. We had all of us there, and and got to have some fellowship and fun and a little meeting out there. And I was a guy who really wanted to be part of something all my life, but always knew that if I wanted to be part of something, I had to lie about something to get in, because if they really knew what was going on, and now I get to be a part of this, those guys, you guys, it's, there used to be a guy, Al Tolis, he always used to say, if you're an alcoholic, this is the greatest show on earth. And I will tell you, I believe it, yeah, this is it. Like I said, it's not what I'd have picked. I had a much more glamorous theory of what would keep me sober, but this is, if you want what we got, here you go. So I'm glad you're all here. Thank you.